In the last series of videos, we considered an important consequence of adopting Putnam/Kripke's view of natural kind terms instead of a broadly Fregean view. Um, in this sequence, we're going to make further use of theories of meaning and theories of reference in particular to think about some important social issues, specifically issues surrounding race and sex/gender. So we're going to start by thinking of using the tools we've acquired by studying theories of meaning and reference in particular to think about race. We're going to loosely follow in some ways a paper by Ron Mullen, which I posted online. We'll also be invoking bits from papers by Anthony Apaye and Sally Haslinger that Mullen mentions, as well as some other further theorizing. So here are the basic positions on the metaphysics of race. Racialism is the first position. And according to racialism, races exist and each race corresponds to a distinct hidden structure. Remember in the last segment, the last sequence of videos, we talked about Putnam's view of hidden structures. He holds that for natural kind terms aim to refer to a hidden structure where the hidden structure is an underlying essence, an underlying feature of the entity we're talking about that is both explains what unifies, say, one sample of water with another, and explains why each sample of water has the superficial properties and behaves superficially in the way that it does. Well, racialism is the view that there are hidden structures for people. Specifically, each race group corresponds to a hidden structure. The second view is racial population naturalism. And according to this view, races do exist, so it agrees with racialism in that respect, but they're grounded in causal history, not in hidden structure. So on racialism, what it is to be, say, a member of the white race or the black race is to have a certain hidden structure. According to the racial population naturalist, if white and black are races, it's because of a fact about their causal histories, not a fact about their hidden structures. According to racial constructivism, races exist, but they're grounded in our social practices. So you may remember here earlier our discussion of grounding. We talked about Jonathan Schaffer's paper on grounding, and we talked about how Schaffer characterizes various positions in metaphysics, like idealism and realism. And he said the idealist, like Berkeley famously, or Berkeley famously, held not that ordinary objects don't exist, but rather that ordinary objects like tables and chairs and cars and so on are grounded in minds. Whereas the realist holds that ordinary objects like tables and chairs and cars and so on are grounded in something that exists independently of minds. Well, the racial constructionist is kind of like an idealist about race. So the racial constructionist says that races do exist, but they're grounded in our social practices. They're grounded in something about us. The final position is radical skepticism. And what radical skepticism about race holds is this, that races don't exist at all. Now, Mullen in his paper deals with racialism very, very quickly. He basically says, look, scientists and philosophers just agree that racialism is off the table, so I'm not going to bother with that. We'll instead move on to looking at population naturalism, racial constructionism, and radical skepticism. That's the structure of Mullen's paper. But for a few reasons, I think it's important to engage racialism very carefully. Now, let me be clear. I don't think it's important to engage racialism because I think racialism is true, and I don't think it's important to engage racialism because I think racialism is plausible. I think it's false, and I think it's actually implausible. But I also think this, that it takes some serious thinking to see that it's implausible. You can't just know by reflecting on the meaning of the word race, for example, that it's implausible. You can't know that it's implausible because it's politically pernicious. That is, the fact that it would have politically bad consequences if it were true, if that's right, wouldn't suggest that racialism is false. And I think people often turn away from racialism not because they understand why we should reject it. That is not because they understand that it's false, not because they understand the reasons why it's likely to be false, but rather because they think it's politically dangerous. And because of that, and let me be clear again, Malin is correct that philosophers and scientists, for good reason, largely reject it. This isn't about what philosophers and scientists need to do. They've already done the reflection. This is about what you guys need to do. You need to reflect and understand the problems with racialism. So we're going to take racialism seriously in the sense that we're going to show why we should reject it, whereas Malin doesn't really do that. And then we'll talk about racial population naturalism, racial constructionism, and radical skepticism. So the next video will be dedicated to racialism in particular. We'll stop this introduction there.